Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox, where we talk about all things Xbox, new and old. And on today's agenda is a review of True Crime Streets of LA, released in 2003 for the original Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. And of course, today's version we are reviewing was on the original Xbox. Published by Activision and developed by Luxoflux, True Crime Streets of LA was touted at the time as the next big open world game and gave way to a new term in the industry of GTA clone. With a huge open world that was a sandbox that you could literally do anything in, like steal cars, kill people, or just roam around in, at the time, this kind of openness was very new, and GTA was the one that captured it so well in GTA 3 with a huge world and a very sweeping game, because this was the future. Every game was trying to copy this format because it was just so huge at the time. In essence, True Crime is a lot like Grand Theft Auto, but its one big main difference is you follow the story of a cop rather than a criminal, and you have the choice to uphold the law for the most part instead of causing complete mayhem. And I remember this game coming up a lot in gaming magazines up to its release. There was a lot of hype building up to this one. Development had started for this game in 2002, and it was based off of just a vehicle combat game that was kind of based around Hong Kong action films. Activision would take this concept and pivot it for Luxoflux into a Grand Theft Auto styled game that we have today. It's huge in very early 2000s. I used to rent this game from Blockbuster constantly as a kid. Its open world was one I could just roam around in and do absolutely nothing and have perfect entertainment. And I guess as we get older, we have to ask for these older games, does it really hold up when we have less time to throw into just roaming the open world and we just want to complete a game's story? And honestly, that's hard to say, because what we have with True Crime Streets of LA is a pretty mixed bag. Starting with the story, you follow Nick King, an off-the-rails detective for the LAPD. You follow him as he investigates bombings in the LA Chinatown. And the voice cast here is absolutely insane for the time. It has Russell Wong as Nick King, Michelle Rodriguez, Christopher Walken, Gary Oldman is the main villain in Snoop Dogg, which that's not even everybody that did voice acting for this game. And honestly, it's a bit hit and miss at times with some actors I feel like not really honing the craft quite yet. But it's fun hearing all these famous people giving out some absolutely insane video game dialogue. The only big issue I had was with our lead Nick King. His lines are complete garbage. He says some really awful one-liners like, "Get on the road, Jack." Oh, I mean Nick. And you will hear that line so many times, and just over and over and over, and it makes this character really unbearable to play. He's actually quite an unlikable character, which is fine for a cop game, but the voice lines did get kind of annoying. I would say the story overall is fine. It's basic detective stuff. Nothing too special carries it along through the story, but I do appreciate that there's a lot of licensed rap music. It kind of fits the game's pacing and tone, and it blasts throughout the whole game. Now, what everybody was talking about at the time, and what I feel like is really important to this game, is its recreation of Los Angeles, which is a huge undertaking for the time because it captures all of LA's districts and a lot of famous buildings. And it's nice graphically for its time. I love the detailed differences between the districts. You really can tell that they weren't copy and pasted. And a lot of the building sizes work really well with scale. And it's huge. It's absolutely huge. It does capture the overall size of LA. And I really enjoyed that about it. Gives it a lot of personality. Unfortunately, there is a lot of pop in here when you go to the busier sections of the city, and that can be a bit distracting, but this game does offer 720p graphics. It's one of the few on the Xbox that does, and it makes it look amazing on modern TVs. And it's a really nice time to just cruise between LA districts, in between missions, and look at this city in its full glory. And I think overall I enjoyed the scale and amount of work that went into making LA into a palatable game map. So another weird thing about this game is that it kind of is 3 games meshed into one. It's part beat 'em up fighting game, third-person shooter, and vehicle combat game. And unfortunately, I want to say that it just doesn't do any of these very well. The fighting segments are some of the worst. They are painfully slow, with health bars that feel like they take ages to go down. It feels fine to play, but it's very basic, so just kicks and punches, and that's about it. The environments you fight in are cool though, because they do destruct really nicely, and it helps with the boringness of the combat system that is just a little too basic. Another part of this game, the vehicle combat part, is fine. Driving the vehicles, it feels okay. It doesn't really feel incredible, just because you don't really use the triggers to accelerate. It's the A button, which I've never been a really big fan of. And it's instead of Y to leave cars, which was kind of set by Grand Theft Auto, this game chooses to use left trigger to get in and out of cars, and it just feels maybe a little archaic because they were really trying to grapple what an open world game controlled like at the time, and maybe just modern sensibilities kind of working into it, but I honestly didn't find the controls or the button mapping to be particularly great. Now, they did handle shooting fairly well. It is an auto-aim format, allowing you to do non-fatal shots if you want good cop points, and fatal shots if you want to do bad cop points. And choices like this will affect the ending of the game, which I think is always a great thing to put in the game, just some multiple endings to spice it up. You can also cruise through the city and bust crimes on the road, and you can either arrest or shoot down criminals. Once again, the button mapping here is really weird, because for arresting, you have to click the stick and hit a button, which just feels like a convoluted way of doing something that could have been mapped to like the white or black button. It's the same for showing your badge to criminals. You click your stick in and hit a button. It just is too much, and I had to go looking in the manual to find out how to do things like this rather than the game telling me to. And also, another thing that's odd about this game is that between episodes, it forces you to roam the city to meet a quota of crimes in order to move on, so you do have to bust criminals in between things, which is really cool at first because it's like a really low crime total. It's like, oh, go around, bust 3 crimes, you know, pretty easy stuff. But then as the game progresses, it goes up and up and up to the point between episodes of the game, you're doing upwards to like 8 crimes. And these crimes don't just pop up anywhere. It's much like real life. You gotta cruise around and just wait for a crime to happen. It's not a great system to break up your game. It feels like a way just to artificially lengthen it. But other than that, I will say the actual episodes are fun, if not way too easy. It has a really weird thing where if you fail the mission, it just lets you skip the whole thing and move on with the story. I guess I like that, but it's a little too forgiving. I think it needs to give you a little bit more time of fails in order to move on. It's odd, and I feel like the speedrunning community, which I don't know much about, that must be a huge part of it, just trying to fail the game as quickly as possible to get through it. And honestly, it might have been a really good thing with some of these stealth missions in this game. They were really skippable. Here's the thing, it's fine for what it is. Grand Theft Auto is on the Xbox, and I do think that game series with 3, Vice City and San Andreas, those are definitely the preferred open world games for this console. But if you need a little dose of open world fun, this is a decent enough choice, because it gives you at least the variety of being a cop and kind of making the right choices rather than just being a horrible person. It has a lot of issues, but it makes up for it with some amount of ambition behind its title, and that open world is really incredible, and I think it's worth just looking at. I've hardly played its sequel, so I'm excited to see if they improve the series going forward. And on my rank list, this one goes in at number 13. Now, I liked it a little better than Project Snowblind, but Haunted Mansion is a game I'd rather revisit as time goes on. But if you enjoyed this video or enjoyed this game a little more than I did, or if you hated it more than I did, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and then subscribe to the channel if you want more content like that. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you here next time at Camp Xbox.